Hi everyone, I'm Jeremy Reeves, head blender of Cornell and Diehl Pipe Tobacco Company, and I have a very good friend with me here today, Pete Prevost of BriarWorks. Pete is the president of BriarWorks, the American pipe factory based in Columbia, Tennessee, and we are the proud producers of the pipe tobacco for BriarWorks, and that's been a project that we started almost 10 years ago.
It's hard to believe.
It is amazing.
I
So,
like when we first started planning me coming out for a visit, it didn't even occur to me until pretty much yesterday or the day before that we were coming up on, 10 years in 2025. It's
yeah,
unbelievable.
it's amazing. So, and that's how long it's been since you've been to visit C&D, and
It's changed.
a very different C&D that you visited
Absolutely.
in 2015.
Yeah,
So,
very different. And like, I think what's really cool about then versus now and seeing the operation is like how much like everything's grown. Like, I mean, the amount of tobaccos that you guys have here, the blending tables, the presses, like the some of the automated equipment that you're using, like it's just a whole different world than what I saw before.
yeah.
And so it's truly amazing to be sitting here in this room with just like massive amounts of tobacco behind us, and yeah, it's awesome to be here.
It's pretty crazy, but the beard nets haven't changed. They're
The beer nuts were there then and they're here now.
right.
The only thing I was thinking about though was one of our flagship sort of blends that we initially introduced was the Pete's Beards blend.
Yeah, that was the very first blend
Yeah.
that we did for the BriarWorks line.
And like I was just thinking, did we miss an opportunity by not wrapping the jar in a beard net? Should we have? Would that have been like the safe and like, sanitary thing to do is have it come with a beard net wrapped around it? I don't know.
Maybe we could explore, Pete's beard nets blend for another blend installment in the line.
Yes. Now, I think something that about that blend that probably some people miss is there's like a little subtle joke within the name. Because I remember when we first launched it, a lot of people would say, "Oh, does it have like some of your beard hair in it or something? Why is it called Pete's Beard Blend?" But I'm like, "Well, it's actually Pete's Beards Blend."
Yeah, it's what your
And
beard smokes.
and at that time, like when we first were developing that, I definitely had a much like larger, more robust beard, not trimmed down. Now you can see that with the hairnet, but it definitely was the joke about my beard was that it was this thick like beard, and it was such a like strong beard that my beard had its own tobaccos that I like to smoke, and it preferred an English Latakia based tobacco.
Right.
So that's why it was Pete's Beards Blend, because it was my beard's favorite blend to smoke.
Yep.
Pretty great.
It is great.
Like
That
that
was
one was originally also really the idea behind that one, was definitely because at that time, for whatever reason, I pretty much just smoked like Latakia based blends. I wasn't really into aromatics at the time, or even like Virginia Periques. It was just like all like English blends, and so it also made a lot of sense then too.
Yep. And then what was the next thing that we
So
were
we
probably back down south?
Yeah, back down south, and that one is a little bit of a lyrical reference. I mean, all of them had like a little bit of a theme, to kind of fit like our location being in like the South and in Tennessee. And back down south was one that, first off, I'm a big Tom Petty fan,
Uh-huh.
and on his Highway Companion album, he has a lyric in one of the songs that says "headed back down south." So that was one part of it. But then also, Kings of Leon are from Nashville,
Okay.
and they have a back down south lyrical reference too.
Oh, okay.
And so it
I didn't
kind of
know
worked
that.
like both ways, to where we kind of were like pulling a little bit of both. But initially, like definitely for me, that like Tom Petty Back Down South reference. One thing, I don't know if you remember this or not, but when we first started like talking about doing the Back Down South blend, you initially sent me some loose, like a loose blend of Back Down South.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was great, and I tried it, and like I don't remember how that happened. We were just talking about it, and I think maybe out of curiosity it was like, Jeremy, could we like make a flake? And
I can't remember how it happened, but yeah, I can't remember if we originally thought we would make a flake, but it was just trying this idea in a ribbon mixture first.
I think we actually weren't talking about doing a flake originally.
Okay.
I think we were actually talking about doing like just a ribbon version, and then after trying it, we had that discussion about, hey, like, could we differentiate this one from the rest of them and try and do a flake? And of course, like the thing that we like haven't discussed yet right now is like the mason jars. That was going to be a little bit of a problem. We couldn't do just a straight up regular flake because the way that they were going to slide around and bang around inside the mason jar, we knew that we weren't going to keep like perfectly intact flakes. Right. So it was more of a broken flake to begin with, because we knew that like inevitably after getting like shipped and moved around, like they were going to kind of get like broken up a little bit.
Yeah, but even just feeding the flakes into the jar is kind of a task if you're trying to preserve them. So
yeah, and like laid in there differently and standing up versus like laid down. But I do remember Back Down South was the first tobacco I ever personally got to try a ribbon cut version and then a flake version and compare them side by side. That was the first time I ever really got to experience I was blown away by like the difference in the depth of flavor that came from like pressing the tobacco and making a flake version. It's a really fascinating thing that like if anybody ever gets a chance to try that, like a different blend that's maybe got a flake and like a loose version, like I definitely recommend it, because it's interesting how different they become.
Yeah, and especially with time and age, they'll age differently because the amount of oxygen that the ribbon has exposure all over it, whereas with the flake, there's the majority of the volume of that tobacco is actually compressed together and can't really breathe as well.
Interesting. And it would seem too like in that format, like it retains probably more moisture as well because of how it's kind of like packed tightly together like that. Which is obviously like when you're packing flake in a pipe, usually you want to, like, if you're breaking it up, you want to like kind of like let it sit out a little bit just to maybe dry a little bit, because
that moisture.
That's cool. Bacon old fashioned, which I think is one of the most polarizing. Oh my gosh. It is. I love that we're talking about this right now, because there's people that are going to watch these clips and they're going to like, probably like shake their fist at just us saying bacon old fashioned.
Right. Some people are going to cheer and some people are going to be cursing.
It's a love it or hate it tobacco. And I personally love it.
I love it too. It's too weird to hate.
So that one was like a huge challenge. I remember, because we had this idea for a name, and I'll give a little background on that. So there was this, it still is this really cool bar in Nashville that we've been to together called the Patterson House.
Yep.
And the Patterson House, they had like the bacon fat infused bourbon that they would use to make a bacon old fashioned cocktail. And so that was the sort of nod to another, Nashville area, cocktail bar to do the bacon old fashioned. And, but that was the biggest challenge. And again, me not being a manufacturer or blender of tobacco, it's just like, hey, Jeremy, make us a bacon flavored tobacco. Turns out that that's not something that you can just easily do. That's very difficult.
I did definitely try.
I can't remember what was some of the stuff that you tried.
I did take bacon and put it in some whiskey, like cooked bacon,
Yep.
and just put it in some
Yep.
whiskey, and then tried using that whiskey on the tobacco, but it didn't impart enough smoky flavor, and also there was a fair amount of lard that ended up like just kind of in the blend that didn't really work.
That's probably going to make people hate it even more. Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was just kind of realizing, oh, wait a second, a little bit of dark fired would add that meaty smokehouse kind of aroma and flavor that is a little salty and could be that bacon aspect. So actually with that blend, and also with the sweet tea and unsweet tea, I really blended these, really focusing on the nose of the blend. Like sweet tea and unsweet tea, I wanted to try and, as closely as I could, just using tobacco, match the smell of a freshly opened box of Louisiane.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember you telling me that, and we talked about it. Like, it's so cool. And then like on the bacon old fashioned, we also, this is where I think the polarizing factor of bacon old fashioned really comes into play, because I think ultimately there's not just some like bacon juice that we could have added to the tobacco where we're like, let's make it taste like bacon.
Sure.
And so we had to use the natural tobacco components to sort of create that smoky hickory bacon smell and flavor. And
then everything else that's in the blend is or everything else that's used as flavoring in the blend is literally the stuff you would use to make an old fashioned.
Yeah, like you get your bourbon, your orange bitters, and like it's awesome. And I think the thing that maybe misses people, and maybe this is why they order a jar of bacon old fashioned and they're like, I hate this, is because I think their anticipation of opening that jar and smelling like a straight up, like sizzling bacon, or something like that. And then they're like, oh, I thought this was going to be like the equivalent of smoking like, vanilla custard tobacco or something like that. And like, having that aroma just pop you in the face and it be this sort of like more like wet aromatic smell, where really it's more of I would say it's technically an aromatic, but it's loosely an aromatic. It's more of a subdued aromatic that like isn't like real wet or anything like that. And I think it's awesome, but I think that's where some people get confused when they maybe buy it. And then I think if you go into it knowing like this is a very like dark fire forward, aromatic tobacco that actually is pretty strong. And like
it's not a slouch on street.
No, and I think that's again where someone might think of bacon old fashioned, they might think, oh, it's just going to be like a little light aromatic or something like that. But it's got some strength to it. And I think if people like kind of get that out of their mind and they try it for what it is and understand and appreciate like, oh, this is like really cool how they like brought in the dark fire to give it sort of that hickory and that smoky flavor. And then we would put that little, extra
piece of dark fire on top, so that when you opened it, you did get that punch of smoke.
And it represents a little piece of bacon in there too, which I think is really, really cool. And like, I always like I've had plenty of conversations with people about bacon old fashioned, and like, I try to like, bring their expectations to where I feel like they maybe should be before they try it.
Sure.
So that they kind of know what they're getting into. This is a strong tobacco. It's not going to be your typical like, wet aromatic that you're used to. It's going to be more like straightforward, and it's going to have a big punch of dark fire to it. But I think it's one of the most unique blends I've ever smoked. It's one of a kind.
Definitely a weird one. It was pretty cool when we made the prototype, and then we went to Patterson.
Yeah.
And ordered bacon old fashions and like compared smell, and
it
was kind of neat to see the way that it actually lined up.
Hard to believe that's been almost 10 years ago.
I know, it's crazy.
So we also then so we had those, and we had did we launch with those three first, or do we have sweet tea yet? I think we didn't have that yet. I think that came in the second wave.
I think you're right.
So I think it was like Pete's Beard's Blend, Back Down South, and Bacon Old Fashioned. Those three first.
Yeah.
And it wasn't too long after that that we wanted to do the sweet tea
And unsweet.
unsweet tea, because we just thought that would be kind of a fun play. And for someone that doesn't like want anything to do with like an aromatic and just wants to smoke those like just more of a straight tea like smelling, tobacco, they could. I love the unsweet tea, but I think even I don't smoke a lot of aromatics, but like I think through these blends you kind of turned me back into someone that can appreciate aromatics, because I think they're just different. They're not what I always thought of, as like just kind of this like sopping wet like aromatic that you can easily get like tongue bite from. Like they're more of, they're more like subdued and not like you're more getting like the actual tobacco flavors, but also catching some of that nice aroma as well.
Right.
And so like sweet tea, unsweet tea, and then we also did Country Lawyer.
Yeah, Country Lawyer is like dark fired in small quantity with cigar and some burley and some Virginia, and there's a little bit of Perique. It's a little bit of a kitchen sink, sans Latakia.
Except remember, you originally sent it with Latakia.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we both felt like, I think normally that's kind of like the common thing with the cigar leaf blend is to use Latakia. And we ended up pulling it because we didn't want that Latakia to overwhelm the blend, and we wanted you to really taste the cigar leaf.
Yeah.
And that's a really good one to have, like especially, we have our own, retail store ourselves now. And so we've got a lot of customers that like love cigars and they want to maybe try a pipe, and like that's a great crossover blend to be able to have to be able to, get them to try something that kind of fits in that wheelhouse that they're used to smoking. Then let's talk about probably the biggest of all of them that came in that same next round was the Peach Cobbler.
Peach Cobbler was really cool because like I remember you hit me up and were just like, we probably need just like a straight aromatic in the line, and like I'm not gonna be into it, but like I know these things are popular. Like you were this was so
like,
much more
gotta do
right,
this,
exactly.
but...
This was so much more in the mindset of like this is what a lot of people are gonna want.
Yeah.
But not so much like coming from a
like
standpoint
we
of,
have to do it, but we don't really want to do it.
And so I kind of took that as like challenge accepted a little bit.
Fair, totally fair.
And so it was really cool to me when I sent you samples to hear like that, like you and Micah and Sam were like passing the stuff around and like loading up more of it and actually really enjoying it.
Dude, I was blown away by Peach Cobbler, like truly, because I again was kind of reluctant to even do it, but it from a more of a business standpoint and just having like filling out the portfolio, it definitely made sense to do.
Yeah, because the only aromatic you had was Bacon Old Fashioned,
which like half of everybody hated.
Right.
So it was like, all right, let's do something more of like a true like aromatic. And the thing that like surprised me by it, I think again like the way that you do aromatics as opposed to like a lot of the stuff that I had in the past is like the subtlety of and like the nuance, and it not just being like again something that like is just gonna like when you dump out your tobacco bowl look like you've had like that you just like poured some liquid into
Right.
And the thing that I think shocked me the most was how much like with aromatic you catch the aroma a lot that's burning off, and especially if you walk into a room and someone's smoking an aromatic, you really smell that smell that smells really nice that people love about pipe tobacco. But like rarely do you taste like the thing that like it says it is. Like it doesn't really come off like a lot of times in aromatic tobaccos, and so people, at least me, I would always find myself disappointed with aromatic tobaccos. But the peach cobbler, especially, and I think you maybe even told me to do this. I don't remember, but like when I smoked it, it was like, keep it really cool, like burn it really cool. Don't get it hot. Like keep burn it as cool as you can. And I couldn't believe how much of the flavor, not only of like the peach cobbler, like the peachy flavor came through, but the sort of like almost like crust and bready flavor
Of the bright Virginia
yeah.
that's in it. Yeah.
And I was like, this is like amazing. Like actually it was like so cool that you were able to capture that into aromatic tobacco.
Thanks.
So yeah, I love that one. So like another thing about our BriarWorks blends that we wanted to, accomplish, I guess, was we wanted it to stand out. And, again, we talked about maybe doing some of the more traditional like C&D, like tins.
Yeah, like the coin.
Yeah. But like, I remember, I think it came about, I want to say that we were at like at the trade show when it was in New Orleans. And I think we went out to lunch, and I can't remember if you were even there for that or not. But Shane,
I was not at that.
Okay, so this is how the packaging happened, because I always like to give him some props for it. But Shane Ireland and was there, and we all went out to lunch, and we were talking about just sort of the planning of more of the technical side of like logistics and the tobacco and like how it's going to be priced or this and that. It was more one of those kind of like a packaging discussion. At this point, I don't even know. I can't remember when this was or if we'd even like developed. I think we had kind of felt pretty good about the few blends that you had put together, and we were ready to kind of move forward with packaging. And we were trying to discuss like, okay, what are we going to put it in? And I do remember like, I vividly remember Shane actually just throwing out like, we should do it in mason jars, because like the whole like Southern theme of it, and like the jars would be super cool. And then it was a long discussion, about like, can we do that? Like glass and jars breaking and weight and all these things, which again, was going to add a little bit to the cost of it. But like ultimately, there was definitely some things on the more like technical side that they had to work through to figure out how to do it. But in the end, I think it really was a great launch for that tobacco, because it immediately made it stand out as a one-of-a-kind pipe tobacco in the packaging. And it just made sense. Again, like every pipe smoker knows that like when you want to not have your tobacco dry out, like you toss into a mason jar. And you can seal it, date it, put it away or whatever. And so I love that we were able to do the mason jar.
Just kind of cut out the middle, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And then truly, it's a great reusable jar.
Yeah.
After someone smokes through that tobacco to put other tobacco in, and so that was a really cool thing. I feel like with the packaging to be able to do that, and this partnership has just been awesome for us, because at that time we were such a new pipe factory, just trying to get like our name out there and get our pipes into stores, and to be able to have you guys manufacturing it and distributing it out to stores, all these stores that at one point were sort of shutting the door in my face when I tried to talk to them about our pipes because they didn't know who we were. All of a sudden were calling us back and saying, hey, we have your tobacco, we should get some of your pipes as well. So like that like actually was surprisingly worked out like really well for us, because if we had tried to distribute it and put it out there, like we wouldn't have had the reach that you guys had to be able to really carry it out to all the different consumers and retailers. So it's been a really great partnership, I feel like, making these. And then another thing that we've done together that some people may or may not know about, if they've come to the Moontown Pipe Show that we do at BriarWorks, they definitely would know about it. But a little backstory on it: when we first were going to do our own, well, actually, when we first were going to open the retail store there in Columbia, that's how it first came about.
Yep.
Because
grand opening.
yeah, the grand opening of our retail location at the Pipe Factory, and I hit you up because I was like, that could be a cool little feature, like to, sort of add something interesting and fun for that day, to have you maybe do a blending demo. And like, in my mind, I didn't think that was like a new thing. Like, I thought maybe I was just asking you to do a thing that you'd probably done a bunch, but turns out it wasn't a thing yet for you to go out and do like a blending demo like that. And I think it was so cool because not only I remember envisioning you coming and just like bringing whatever C&D blend and just showing people, this is how we put this together. And then you showed up with like a unique blend that you had created for that special event. And that was so cool because I remember even after you did the demo, and I don't know if you had planned this or not, but somebody asked you, so what's the name of this blend? And you said 511 North Main, which is our street address. Yeah. And that was pretty cool. So we would refer to it as that. But that following year is when we first launched the Moontown Pipe Show, and thought we should bring that back as the Moontown mixture. And like, there's like, you could probably, I'm not good at this, but like kind of the base like blend of what Moontown mixture is for people that don't know what that is.
Sure. So it's a blend of several different Virginias. There's some Canadian Bright Virginia. There's some North Carolinian Red Virginia.
Nice. And
then there's a couple of steam processed Virginias that have been cased. And then the secret touch in the blend is like a tiny amount of Perique.
Nice.
That like helps if you're going to cellar the product. Like it just kind of acts like a little bit of like a starter.
Nice.
To fermentation. And then there's a casing made with whipped cream and marshmallow infused vodkas and honey.
Love it. It's so good. And in that first year we launched it, and we just did a limited batch of 10s for the show only, and that's how it's always been. And we did, I think the first two Moontown shows we did the same thing, and then the third Moontown show, that's when we were like, hey, let's change it up. And we did the
hay bale.
The hay bale.
So we took the blend and pressed it into a cake.
That was awesome. And then last year we did the slices.
Yep. So we did flake.
And part of the reason I'm here right now is because we are starting to plan next year's, which is exciting. And I love that like you made a really cool like unique tobacco blend just for our event. But there's so many options. Like I feel like we've been able to keep like changing it and adding and developing different little nuances to kind of feature different elements that go into the tobacco. So I'm excited to see what happens for next Moontown Pipe Show's blend. And for anybody that's never been to the show, like if you want to try it, you got to come to the show. So definitely come out and get a 10 of it while it's available.
It's cool. The artwork that Micah did for it is always so rad. Like I love those labels.
Yeah.
And even though it's in the traditional C&D 10, like I think that it fits really well with the overall aesthetic.
Yeah.
That the BriarWorks brand has too.
Absolutely. Micah knocked it out of the park on the packaging label for it. And that's another one that we've kind of changed, like the color theme or just like little tweaks to the label each year to kind of make it stand out and make it unique. But yeah, it's a great tobacco, and it's really cool for us to have like something that's like featured every year at the Moontown show. Yep. But man, it's been great talking with you.
Yeah, same, man. It's been great knowing you for 10 years.
Yeah, can't believe it.
It's awesome.
It's awesome. We're gonna have to try and do something special next year for 10 years. We'll see what we come up with.
All right.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for coming out to visit.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for watching.